So Blake is out of Texas. And he started as a beekeeper as a youth. He got a hive just like Andrew did. And at first didn't even want it. And then got into it, started doing it. He now owns 5 different companies, 3 stores, beekeeping supply stores. I founded the Bee Supply, which is these guys out of Texas. And in 2016 to help out local beekeepers. So now he's got stores in Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and Austin. Major promoter of beekeeping in the US, an exceptional trainer, and a huge impact on pollination across the US. He's got thousands of hives. He's the one, if some of you remember me giving a presentation about taking the pollination tour, Blake's the one that puts that on. And hopefully Blake will do it again this year. Nod your head.
We'll see.
Last year was $250. And you went out and worked with him in hives. He drove you around everywhere in a van, showing you all the different crops that get pollinated, what the cost difference is. It was well worth the trip to fly out there and do it. I thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot. So with that, I'll turn it up. And also to say, I got my t-shirt from the Bee Supply. I order most of my supplies from these guys. They run some fantastic specials. And so hopefully for our November banquet, Blake will send me some catalogs. Okay.
He's
nodding.
We can do that. You bet.
That's good.
And get thanks. Yeah, okay. All right, I'll turn it over to Blake and let him give us our presentation.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
No, they can't hear you.
All right,
Can't
hold
hear
on.
me?
Let me see if I've been kicked off again. Yeah, it's
Hear me now?
requires me to.
Can you hear me
know
now?
where it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't find system. It won't open system preferences.
Let's go close.
Okay, here we go. All right, now can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No, okay, hold on just a sec.
Can you hear me?
How about now?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Wonderful. Well, good evening, guys, and thank you so much for that introduction. It's been it was wonderful to go on that trip, and I had a wonderful time. It was a blast for me, and hopefully everyone else enjoyed it half as much as I did. And Wallace actually helped us in other instances when we were at a trade show in Utah and helped us procure a hive to show off at a trade show. And so really appreciate all you do as well for us. You guys are in one of my all-time favorite states. The first time I was ever there, it was 115 degrees. And I went hiking up in the hills, and honestly, coming from Texas, it wasn't that bad because there was no humidity. It was such a dry heat that it was actually quite wonderful. And I've been back many times, and I absolutely love it. So a little envious of you guys, but excuse me, I'm down here in Texas, and we operate bees all over the country. Though we have operations in North Dakota and South Dakota, and a little bit in Montana, and then California, and then all over Texas. And so we get around a lot with our bees. But one of the things that we deal with a lot is really rough summers, like you guys do as well. And it's taken a lot of years to figure out how to navigate keeping bees strong and healthy as we go through these prolonged periods of drought and dearth where there's just nothing for our bees. And so this is kind of a culmination of several years of trying to keep bees alive in the summer in Texas, where there's very little forage. And this presentation is not from a commercial beekeeping standpoint. It's taking what I've been able to learn at all scales. I started with one beehive in my backyard and was a small scale beekeeper for many years, then a sideline beekeeper, now a commercial beekeeper. But this takes all those principles I've learned and applies it to, 2 to 20 hives. So we're not going to talk about commercial beekeeping, but small scale beekeeping. How I deal with dearth these days, though, as a commercial beekeeper, this is the only part where I'll talk about it, is we leave the dearth area. We pick up our bees in June when it gets hot and dry in Texas, and we move them to the Dakotas.
Hey, Blake, are you showing
yes.
slides right now?
I am, yes.
Why can't we
Are you not seeing them?
One moment. The people on Zoom are, but we're not seeing it in here. You need to switch. Sorry.
No, no worries.
Let me know when you got it.
Okay.
Okay, we need to go to your.
I'll keep talking, and I'll let you know before I switch slides again. But we pick up our bees these days and move them up to a cooler climate where there's a great pollen flow, and our bees really never leave ideal conditions. So when it gets too hot in Texas, they move to North Dakota. When it gets too cold in North Dakota, they move to California. When it starts getting too hot in California, they move back to Texas. And so we kind of move our bees throughout the country, throughout the year, to keep them in really ideal weather conditions for our bees. So, but for many, many, many years, I wasn't able to do that. And we still leave a lot of, oh, we good now?
No, so you're sharing your screen.
I am sharing my screen. Yes.
Okay.
Is that the screen? Yes.
Were you able to see the first slide?
All right. We can see you now. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Are you seeing the picture in the yellow flowers?
Yes.
Wonderful. So that's actually where our bees are right now. That's canola up in North Dakota. And it's absolutely beautiful when it blooms. It's just this fluorescent yellow as far as the eye can see in the Dakotas. And when it stops blooming, there is absolutely nothing to see in North Dakota. If you see trees, then there's got to be a house because someone planted trees around their house. We're up in the northeast corner where it's very flat, not a lot going on. But when the canola is blooming, absolutely beautiful. So something to keep in mind is the fundamentals of keeping your bees healthy throughout dearth periods is that during periods of poor nutrition, just like humans, we've got to pay really close attention to our bees' health. If we as humans are in a nutritionally poor period and we're eating hamburgers and French fries and soda for all of our meals, we're at risk of a lot of other health issues. And the bees aren't any different. If they're bringing in beautiful multicolored pollen all throughout the spring, they're doing great. But once we get to summer, pollen flow dies down, nectar flow dies down. Maybe there's 1 or 2 colors of pollen coming in. That's when we have to start becoming vigilant. Oh, in the picture there, I gave this presentation in Florida, and you don't have to worry about hurricanes, but they do, and they'll have hurricanes come through and anywhere along the Gulf Coast, and it can wipe out all their forage for a month. That the hurricane will just wipe out all the forage. And so sometimes we have to pay attention to unique weather events as well to make sure that our hives are cared for. I love this. So yeah, scan that QR code. I love watching the US Drought Monitor map. If you're not familiar with this map, it is updated every couple of days. It's updated throughout the entire United States. You can click on your state. You can even look county by county, and you can see what the drought conditions are in your state and in your area. I go check in on this about once a month because it's really helpful for me to see, we have been really dry. that's a predictor of what I'm about to face with my bees. If I have a really dry spring and a really dry early summer, I know that the flowers that might normally bloom in the summer aren't going to be blooming. So I've got to pay special attention to my bees. Versus if I've got plenty of rain, I know that I may not have as severe of a dearth period. So I really love keeping an eye on this map. I love this one as well. So this one is the National Phenology Network, and they start this in January, and every day it's updated until I think it's maybe June. And they've got two different maps. One is the bloom index, and one is the leaf index. So this tracks spring. And so the darker the red, the earlier spring is, and the darker the blue, the later the spring is. So you can kind of keep an eye on this to predict when your pollen flow begins and how early or late spring is in your season. And I just, it's a super cool map, and it tells me, if I've got a really early spring, that tells me that, the pollen flow is coming early. Nectar flow is probably coming early. If it's dark blue, I know, my bees are not going to build up as early this year because spring is really late. So it's just another cool map to keep an eye on the progress of blooms in your area. I love this picture. I love looking at this picture every August because it makes it feel a little less hot outside looking at it. And this was actually in Texas, believe it or not. This was the most snow I've ever seen in North Texas where I live. We got about a foot of snow one winter, and it's the most we'd ever gotten. But what we have to keep in mind, and it's hard to get our minds into this mindset, but winter preparation begins in the summer months. So when you harvest honey, or in the dead of the summer, is when you're supposed to be thinking about winter. In beekeeping, we try to think months in advance. And so right now is when you've got to be preparing your bees for winter. Something funny happens with bees. They start raising winter bees about 6 to 8 weeks before daytime temperatures are consistently in the 50s. So for you guys, I don't know your exact climate, but I would guess that's not too far from now. You're probably 8 weeks for daytime temperatures in the 50s or ish. And bees raise other bees differently depending on if they're summer bees or winter bees. Summer bees, they know they're going to work themselves to death in about 6 weeks, and so they feed them a poor nutritionally sound diet, and because they know they're not going to live long. Bees that are going to overwinter, so those bees that they're raising, 1 to 2 months before winter starts, they know that those bees have to live 6 months or more. They've got to survive the entire winter and start the hive over the next year. And so they try to feed those developing bees as much as perfect and nutritionally sound diet as they possibly can. So they want diverse pollen, plenty of pollen, good amounts of nectar coming in so that they can feed those bees a perfect diet, and those develop into winter bees. If in that period of time, they do not have the right nutrition, let's say it's a really bad dearth that year, they don't have multiple colors of pollen coming in, they don't have any nectar coming in, then those bees, those overwintering bees, aren't raised properly. And what you'll typically see is those hives will die out before spring arrives, because instead of raising 6-month bees, they only had the nutritional supplies to raise maybe 3-month bees. And so your hive crashed before wet spring got here. So that's why, as a beekeeper, I step in and make sure my hive's very much taken care of nutritionally at least 8 weeks before daytime temperatures are in the 50s. So that's what I mean by preparing for winter. We're going to break that down. I'll break that down for you, what exactly that looks like. But that's why right now we start preparing our hives for winter. If we wait until October, November to get our bees ready for winter, it's way too late. Not a lot we can do that late in the year to get our bees ready for winter. Oh, I just throw this out here because it's really cool. This is the average use of products for one feral hive per year. The average hive uses 44 pounds of pollen per year, 264 pounds of nectar, 26.4 quarts of water, and 7 ounces of resin, which they use for propolis. That is a lot of resources that a hive needs to survive. And so if you have a particularly harsh summer or poor spring, we as beekeepers have to step in and make sure the hive has what they need to properly survive. So what do they need? What does a hive need to properly thrive? They need protein, which is pollen. They need a variety of pollen. You know, if they're just bringing in 1 or 2 colors of pollen, that's often not enough. They need carbs, which is nectar or syrup. They need to be largely free of mites, under 2 mites per 100 bees. They need to be largely free of brood disease, and they need a healthy, vibrant queen. That's what your beehive needs to have right now. So for the next 8 weeks, your hive needs to fit these parameters to prepare properly for winter. So how do we identify nutritional issues? How do we know if our hive doesn't have the nutrition they need? I want to preface with prevention is key. Ideally, we don't want to identify nutritional issues after our hive has already been starving for a month, because that really lowers their immune system. So kind of like varroa mites, you know, if you're seeing varroa mites on your bees, you're in big trouble. We want to treat varroa mites before we get to that point. Same with nutrition issues. Here's something I see a lot. Summer versus spring pollen stores. So the frame on the right is what I see all the time in the spring. You know, beautiful frames, almost full of pollen, multiple colors of pollen, just gorgeous. The left is what I typically see in the summer. I've got some capped brood. I've got some pollen kind of mixed in with the capped brood, a little bit of nectar, maybe 1 or 2 colors of pollen, but not nearly as much pollen as I see in the spring. What I want to see at all times in my hive when brood is present, I want to always see a cumulative half frame full of pollen. So if I am going through my hive and looking at their pollen stores, if I were to add it all up, I want it to fill at least half of a frame of pollen. If it doesn't, I'm going to be feeding a pollen substitute in these summer dearth months. Something else you can look at is larvae. You know, are the larvae well fed or are they hungry? So the picture on the right is a great example of larvae that are well fed. These larvae are literally floating in royal jelly. That's how they should look when they're 0 to about 3 days. At day 4 and 5, they get so big that they're filling up the cell and you can't really see. But when they're at this stage, you should see them floating in that white royal jelly. The picture on the left is a little hard to see. I need to take a new one. But if you look closely, you really can't see any royal jelly under these larvae. They're hungry. So that's another way you can tell if your hive needs syrup and pollen, is what's going on with the larvae. Well-fed versus overfed. You can overfeed your bees syrup. You can't really overfeed them pollen substitute, but you can overfeed them syrup. So if you look on the left here, this frame, if I'm seeing frames like the one on the left inside my brood nest area, that these should have brood, cap brood, and they're filling the center of these frames with syrup or nectar, then I know I'm overfeeding. I want to see pictures like the right in my brood nest area. I want to see plenty of honey around the edge, but lots of brood in the middle. Now, your outside frames on the brood box can certainly be more of a mix, but those center, 4 to 6 frames should have the center reserved for brood and the edges with honey or nectar or syrup. If they're filling everything in, then you're overfeeding. Now, the exception to this is going to be kind of the final 3 weeks to 4 weeks of fall, when the brood is really shutting down, the bees are shutting down, the queen has stopped laying. That's when you will see them really filling in the brood nest, and I'm fine with that. But I don't want to see that until kind of that final month before winter hits. Cannibalizing brood is it's hard to save a hive once they start cannibalizing brood. So if you're going through a hive and it looks like this, where there is no honey stores to speak of, and they're chewing out that brood, they're cannibalizing that brood, that's when a hive is so starved nutritionally, they probably aren't going to survive. So what are our basic goals behind feeding syrup and pollen substitute, which are two of the biggest things we can do to prevent nutritional issues? The goal is to ensure bees never run out of resources to continue rearing brood, as long as we're in a season that they should be rearing brood. We want to ensure our bees' immune systems stay healthy. We want it to ensure proper winter stores. And sometimes of the year, we're feeding syrup to encourage comb or brood production. It's usually in the early spring. What I love to do throughout the summer is I love to do what's called trickle feeding. And what that is, it's feeding about 2 1-pound pollen patties per month throughout the whole summer. I don't like to feed more pollen than the bees can eat in about a 1 week period. And then I feed sucrose syrup, so sugar syrup, 1 to 1 sugar water, about 1/4 to 1/2 a gallon per week. So it's enough to stimulate the queen to lay more eggs and rear brood, but not usually so much that they're going to backfill the brood nest and overfill it with syrup. So this creates just a steady trickle of food throughout the dearth period. If I just dump a whole bunch of food on them at once and then don't come back for 3 weeks, they're not going to starve. That's certainly better than nothing. You know, if you live a long way from your bees and you can only visit them once a month, by all means give them 2 pollen patties, give them a couple gallons of syrup at a time, and come back in a month. But if you live close by to your bees, giving them this steady trickle stimulates a natural nectar flow and a natural pollen flow, and tends to keep them laying and growing a little bit better. It's super important to learn your local forage. So this is where doing what you guys are doing, visiting as a bee club, talking to folks that are have been keeping bees longer than you in your local area to understand, hey, what are our summer blooming plants that yield great pollen flows and nectar flows? And then see, are those blooming this year? Are not hardly any of them blooming? What's the status, etc. Something I like to do if I'm trying to boost my brood production. So if I've got a weak hive, or if it's a really bad dearth, I really love using Complete. You can buy, we sell, other companies do too, global pollen patties mixed with Complete. Global pollen patties are by far, in my opinion, the best pollen patties on the market. And then you can buy them with the Complete mixed in. You can also just buy Complete and mix it with your sugar water. And it does a great job of giving the bees, it's got like 150 something ingredients. It really helps make up the difference for pollen. So if the pollen flow is really bad or the pollen they're bringing in isn't great nutritionally, Complete kind of bridges that nutritional gap. So I really like feeding this throughout the summer, especially if it's a bad dearth. In my opinion, good pollen substitute is insurance. There's some years where you probably don't need it. There's some years where there's probably a good enough summer and fall pollen flow that you may not need pollen substitute at all. But you don't really know until it's too late if you should or shouldn't feed it. So it's relatively inexpensive. I treat it like cheap insurance and just feed it every year. So we talked about it a little bit already. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but here's a great picture that illustrates overfeeding. And again, if you're a couple weeks from fall hitting, I'm not worried about this. But when it's the middle of the summer and your hive looks like this, I'm certainly backing off feeding. When you've got that little patch of brood in the middle, everything else is honey. I'm seeing that in the very center frames. I've overfed a little bit. To fix it, it's pretty easy. You can just pull a few frames of Complete, I would usually pull 2 frames of honey out of the hive, set them 30 or 40 feet away from my hive, let bees rob the honey out for a day, and then I put those frames back inside my brood nest, bordering the current brood. I don't put them right in the middle because I never want to separate brood in my brood nest. I put those empty frames on the bordering frames of brood. And then they'll move honey around to give themselves space to let the queen keep laying. I also really like to feed, if your hive needs some food, but not a lot of food, sugar bricks or fondant is a great option throughout the summer, fall, or winter to just give them kind of a steady trickle of food that they're not going to run the risk of backfilling the brood nest. So we sell something called, we call it Stan's soft sugar brick. It's what you see in the picture here. It's sugar, pollen substitute. It's got Complete in it. It's got several other mystery ingredients. And it's kind of like a summer nutritional food protein boost that a lot of beekeepers here in Texas anyway leave them on starting in the summer, and they'll leave them on even all throughout the winter. And the bees kind of use it as emergency food, and it's not going to cause them to backfill the brood nest. I put this up, some people open feed. I don't really recommend it. I'm not a big fan of open feeding, putting syrup out and letting the bees rob it. The big reason I'm not is that strong hives tend to do really well because they'll go forage and get tons of syrup, usually too much, and the weaker hives won't go out and get it at all. And then it's a great opportunity when all those bees are together to share viruses and varroa mites. So not a big fan. Robbing is especially prevalent during dearth periods. So what I recommend doing is when you are feeding your bees, feed late in the evening so that if you drip syrup, bees have all night to clean up the syrup drips. Ensure your equipment is tightly fitting. And this is a secret that I don't tell a whole lot of people, but it works amazingly well. Pine sol is the greatest thing ever to end robbing. Now, I wouldn't ever spray it inside the hive. Don't spray it on the entrance. But in this picture you see right here where the bees are trying to get under the lid and in between the cracks, a few sprays of pine sol and it completely shuts robbing down. So there's the tip for the day. There you can see a good illustration of robbing. Another huge factor during any period, but during dearth periods is varroa control. Proactive planning is really key here, much like identifying nutrition issues. Out of control varroa mite levels lead to long-term crashes in honeybees. It's the leading cause of hive death. Varroa populations typically hit critical levels in July and August. It's the leading cause of winter death, and that's kind of in air quotes because a lot of people say, well, my bees must have gotten too cold in the winter, or my bees must have frozen, or wax moths killed my bees, because in the summer and fall, there seemed like there were a lot of bees in the hive. And then when it got cold, the bees died. The vast majority of times, that's caused by varroa mites. What was happening is your varroa mite levels were out of control in the summer and fall. And they don't usually just wipe out your hive immediately, but varroa mites transmit a lot of viruses and it weakens your bees to the point where once it starts getting cold, the hive just collapses. So usually it doesn't kill bees in the summer and fall unless it's just a really serious infestation. It usually starts in the summer and fall and then kills your bees in the winter. So getting those levels under control, certainly right now, by now, is critical. Location. Don't ever rely on a visual inspection to determine if you've got varroa mites or not. Varroa mites do not like to ride around on a bee's back like you see on this picture. They like to wedge up underneath the bee's abdomen, like you see over here on the left. And so, yeah, you're not usually going to see varroa mites. If I'm visually seeing varroa mites in a hive, I can usually safely assume my varroa mite levels are absolutely out of control, and that hive probably won't make it. So testing is really, really important. I usually test, 2 or 3 hives per bee yard, and that tells me an average of what's going on in all the hives. And I usually test about every 6 weeks. Sticky boards are great. They're not as accurate as other forms of testing, but you don't kill any bees. And I usually tell people the best test for varroa mites is the one that you'll actually do. So an alcohol wash is the most effective test for varroa mites as far as getting an accurate count, but it kills a lot of bees. It's not always easy to do, so a lot of beekeepers just don't do it. So sticky board, it's not as accurate, but most beekeepers can buy a $10 sticky board, and all you do is you stick it under your screen bottom board or directly into the hive entrance. Don't inspect the hive within 1 day of sticking it in there. Let it sit for 24 hours and then pull it out and then count the varroa mites. In the summertime, if you've got over 11 varroa mites, you certainly need to do a treatment. So pretty simple. There is a new method. You can scan the QR code there if you want to learn about that new method. It's using CO2 to basically put the bees to sleep rather than killing them with an alcohol wash. but the manufacturer's having trouble with the CO2 cartridges, so there's not many of them left in the US right now. But it is a cool method. If you want to watch a video on how to do that, you can scan that QR code. I'm going to skip that really quickly. So you've got 4 different control options when you're trying to treat for varroa mites. One is a chemical control. 2, you can do mechanical or chemical-free options. 3, you can rely on genetics or breeding. And 4, you can use an integrated pest management approach to all of the above. Now, as we talk about these briefly, be realistic with yourself. Will you take the time to faithfully learn and take the steps to be a treatment-free beekeeper? A lot of beekeepers want to be treatment-free. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of knowledge. It's not easy to do. And so I recommend beekeepers, if you're in your first 2 to 3 years of beekeeping, use a chemical treatment that's effective and learn beekeeping. And then once you really know what you're doing, then experiment with treatment-free options, because it is not easy to do. Know the pros, cons, and risks of each method. Nothing is not an option in most cases. The outcome of nothing is your bees will die. Keep in mind there are varying classes of chemicals ranging from synthetic to natural, but natural doesn't always mean better or effective. This is how I tackle varroa mites in general. I take an integrated pest management approach to all the methods. So I start with good genetics. Genetics, though, are not going to fully control varroa mites. We're not there yet. I'm optimistic in the next 5 years we might get there, but on most cases, we are not there yet. No one's out there selling a bee that you can just put in a hive and not worry about varroa mites, even if they say they are. But that's the foundation. Start with bees that have great genetics. Next, you can go to screen bottom boards, powdered sugar treatments, brood breaks, heat, etc. Those aren't usually enough to fully control varroa mites. They can help though. Next, you've got organic chemicals like formic acid, oxalic acid, hop guard, apiguard. Those have a decent efficacy. Apiguard, I would say, is the most effective. Oxalic and formic acid are very effective when there isn't brood in the hive. But you really have to control varroa mites while they're still brood in the hive. If you wait until the hive is broodless in October or November, they're already going to be dead or dying from varroa mites. So you really have to do some earlier treatment. And Apiguard and Amitraz, this one on the top, are the 2 that do work pretty well, even if there is brood in the hive. Another thing we see during dearth periods are mean bees. It can be situational. The determining factor is whether bees are consistently mean or not. So if every time you visit your beehive, they're mean, no matter what's going on, that's genetics. If they just got mean all of a sudden in the summer, it could just be that you're in the summer dearth. Bees get grumpy when they're not out foraging. So that can certainly happen. So there's a lot of, oh, there we go. There's mean bees. So that's our crew in North Dakota. Funny thing, and yes, that is staged. They are being attacked by bees, as you can see, but they're professionals and they've got great bee suits on, so they're not actually getting stung. But we see this all the time. This is a canola field, and this is a good example of it not being genetics, it just being situational. So when canola blooms, when a bee is gathering pollen from canola, the canola slaps the bees back with pollen so that the bee will transfer pollen to the next flower. And this is everybody's best guess. It sounds like a joke, but this is the only thing we know why. We think the bees get really tired of being slapped on the back all day. And when the canola starts blooming, bees just get crazy mean on canola. As soon as it stops blooming, they're gentle again. So you can have weird things like that are very environmental that cause bees to be mean. If they're consistently mean all the time, it's genetics. Number of hives per location can affect bees' temperament. As you open one hive, they get the next one stirred up, and the next will get stirred up, and they can get progressively more angry. Sun versus shade. Bees tend to be calmer in the sun versus a shade. Honey flow versus dearth. Bees tend to be calmer during honey flows. time of day. You know, bees are usually a little grumpier in the evening and in the morning when all the foragers are still in the hive. Weather plays a huge role. Is it rainy? Is it windy? You know, the poorer the weather, the grumpier the bees. Mowing and edging around hives. Certainly, if you've done that before, you know they do not appreciate that. Jarring and bumping a hive can make them more grumpy. Oops, sorry. The importance of smoke. Oh, I don't know why that keeps playing. Smoke is super important. It's amazing to me how many beekeepers call me and say, my bees are super mean. I'm like, have you figured out your smoker yet? I'm like, no, I can never get that stupid thing to stay lit. I just work my bees without smoke. Even gentle bees can be pretty nasty without smoke. So make sure you've conquered your smoker. So, all right, let's skip it so we don't keep seeing that. Oh, this is another picture of the bees on canola. So they get pretty upset. And these are bees that when it's not blooming, you know, we could almost work them without a veil. So it's Walt, maybe the next trip we can do is to North Dakota and visit the bees on canola. It's a whole new level of excitement. Almost done here, guys, and I'd love to take your questions. Equalizing hives is another really important tool in the toolbox when it comes to keeping our bees healthy. You can share brood bees and honey between hives if you do it properly. And this is something I do almost year round. Anytime I'm going out and visiting my bees, you know, I'm taking resources from really awesome hives and giving it to weaker hives. Here's some prerequisites though. Hives have to be low on mites. If you're exchanging brood or bees, you do not want high mite levels because you don't want to transfer mites between hives. No brood disease. And you want to leave the original donor hive at least one box full of bees this time of year. And then gauge the strength of a hive on warm days over 60 because it's hard to figure out just how strong or weak a hive is if it's under 60 degrees. If you're equalizing brood, here's what I do. I select a frame of mostly capped brood. I shake off the bees. I add the frame of brood in the center of the brood nest between other frames of brood and the weak hive. You got to make sure that weak hive has enough bees to fully cover the new frame of brood. I don't add more than one frame of brood at a time because it can overwhelm a weak hive and they may not have enough bees to take care of the brood. And then I replace the frame in the original hive with an empty frame on the outside edge of the brood nest on the hive you took the brood from. Equalizing honey is pretty simple. You can just pick a frame full of honey on a hive that has extra honey, shake off the bees, add it to the outside edge of the brood area in the hive that needs honey. Keep in mind, you don't want to separate brood with a frame of honey, so don't just stick it right in the middle between frames of brood. Brood always needs to stay together in the hive. And of course, replace that frame in the same manner. Sharing bees is a little more complicated, but here's how you do it. If you have a hive that really needs bees, maybe they need bees and brood. I get a frame from a really strong hive that's got lots of extra bees that's full of larvae, because a frame full of larvae, all the bees on that frame are going to be nurse bees, which means they're younger and they're going to integrate into a new hive seamlessly. So first of all, make sure the queen isn't on that frame. You don't want to shake your queen off into a different hive. Smoke the entrance of your weak hive. Shake the bees off the frame into the entrance of the weak hive. You can do that with up to 3 frames of bees, but make sure you don't take too much from your strong hive. They need to have at least one box full of bees and plenty of bees left over to cover their own brood. So you can boost up weak hives with bees, brood, and honey. Let's see, we're gonna skip that for the sake of time. I'm going to give you guys a link in the end. By the way, we've got like hundreds of videos on our YouTube channel that illustrates literally everything I've been talking about tonight. So, and then there's a video on there on how to equalize honey, how to equalize brood, how to equalize bees, all that's on there. One cool little trick that I like to do is in the summer is once I've harvested my honey, I like to pull all the supers off my hives and put a box of foundation back on my hive and then trickle feed and let them draw out a box of comb throughout the summer. They're not doing anything else anyway. And then I get all my comb drawn out for the next year using sugar water, which is much cheaper than my bees drawing out comb using honey the next spring. So trickle feed method, feed 1-to-1 syrup. You got to feed consistently so that they keep drawing out comb, but not so much that they become honey bound. And then I always feed complete if I'm trying to get them to draw out comb in the off season. So a couple of resources I want to share with you guys. One is our monthly buzz webinar. We do these every the first Thursday night of every month. And then we post it on our YouTube channel. But we talk for an hour and a half about practical beekeeping and what you need to be doing this month in your bees. So love to have you guys for that if you're interested. And then we also have a free monthly magazine. And so you can scan this and check out our free monthly magazine. It's usually 60 to 70 pages. And it's just 100% practical beekeeping. Here's what you need to be doing this month in your bees. I don't have a YouTube channel. Sorry, guys. So if you go to YouTube and just search the bee supply, then you will find our YouTube channel. And it has all of our historical monthly buzz videos, as well as, couple hundred in the bee yard practical videos that describe everything I talked about in here and more. So with that, I would love to answer any questions that you guys have. Let me know what didn't make sense to you, and love to help you out any way I can.
Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure. I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time. So thanks for bearing with me.
I have a question about
Sure.
equalizing bees. Why do you shake them off and have the bees from the strong hive walk into the weak hive?
Yeah, good question. So I've noticed that there tends to be less fighting when that happens. If I shake them directly into the hive, for some reason they tend to view that as more of an invasion, and there tends to be more fighting that goes on in the hive. When I shake them off in the entrance, another reason is that when you shake bees in any situation, whether you're shaking bees to make packages or shaking them off in an entrance, nurse bees tend not to fly away. Nurse bees tend to just sit there or crawl into the hive. Foragers will fly away when you do that. The bees, nurse bees tend to be readily accepted in a new hive, whereas older foragers are not. So if you shake all those, a mix of foragers and nurse bees into a hive, the foragers all get into a fight. Shaking them in the entrance, the nurse bees crawl right in uncontested, forager bees fly away, and there isn't as much fighting.
We have another question.
Though. Sure.
Been hearing about keeping your beehive so it is oriented to magnetic north.
Did you hear that question?
I think so. What was it? Should you point your hives to the magnetic north?
Yes. Do you think that?
Yeah. No. No, I don't. I think that, when we look at nature, bees have entrances facing up, down, right, left, east, west. I mean, all directions diagonal. They don't seem to prefer, in nature, they don't seem to move into new homes that face north. So they don't seem to prioritize that in nature. And then, we certainly have bees pointed in all sorts of directions all the times, and we don't notice hives facing magnetic north with better yields, better strength. We don't see a strong advantage to that. I would say though that again, I don't think it matters a whole lot which direction they're pointing, but I do like to point bees so that the wind isn't blowing constantly in their entrance. And I do like to point them so that if possible, the sunlight shines right into the entrance in the morning, because the sooner hives see that sunlight and feel the warmth from it, the faster they come out and forage. So, not letting a cold north wind blow in the entrance is helpful, and then having them pointing towards the sunlight is certainly helpful too, but not critical, but helpful.
Any other? Yes.
I'm just looking on your website and the links under learn the craft don't seem to be working. Just
Thank you.
link to the YouTube. I mean, it might just be me, but.
Okay, I'll check that out. Thank you.
Hey, Blake, you said, add the complete to your sugar water. How much do you add to like a gallon feeder?
Not a lot. And I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head what translate to for a gallon, but I think it's something like a tablespoon or less per gallon. So a little bottle goes a really long way.
Okay. Cause it's what, about $22 for a small bottle?
Yeah, 4 ounces or so.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, a small bottle, will do, several hives for a season.
Okay.
When we do our candy board workshop in the fall,
Mhm.
the gentleman that runs that for us adds complete to the sugar in the candy board.
Nice,
And
beautiful.
ours is 2 tablespoons for like 20 pounds of sugar or something like that, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's perfect to add to candy boards. Great idea.
I have 2 questions.
Oh, yes, just talk loudly.
Oh, yeah, so first question is, as you get, later in the summer, you're treating for varroa and you're considering forming pro as the temperatures drop. Do you worry about, would you pick it, and do you worry about queen death this late in the season, or do you just consider it
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not a huge fan of Formic Pro personally, unless I'm requeening my hive, because I definitely see queen loss. It's hard on the queen. I mean, anytime we're putting an acid, whether it's oxalic or formic, formic's even harder on the bees than oxalic acid. I certainly see queen loss. So when I use formic is often in the springtime, early spring, while it's still cool and I'm about to requeen and split all my hives anyway. I'll often do a formic treatment, and then that next week I'm resplitting and requeening everything anyway, so I don't care about the queen loss. But outside of that, I'm pretty leery with formic just because it can certainly be rough on the queens.
your, like, and that includes the, 1 formic pad for 10 days and then the immediate pad right after that for another 10 days, or 2 pads for 21 days, whatever it is?
So is your question which is better? 2 pads for 20 days or 10 and 10?
Guess I was asking, if you do the 20-day treatment, and if you're seeing queen loss with that as well.
Yeah, it's not, if you use a smaller dose for a longer period, I don't see quite as much queen loss. But I do still see, 10 to 30% queen loss, even with that.
So you're doing OA probably then for late in the season is your treatment of choice.
So my treatment of choice later in the season is if they still have significant amounts of brood, it's Apivar or Apigard. Both those seem to do decent when there's brood in the hive. If they're getting to a point where the queen is starting to shut down and I'm down to maybe 1 or 2 frames of brood, oxalic acid can work pretty well in that more broodless period. But when I've still got 5, 6 frames of brood, yeah, the Apivar and the Apigard is all that I find that really has that 90-something% efficacy rate.
Thanks. The other question I had is, you can't laugh.
I won't.
Okay, so so it's like the viral thing is bananas hive. And it.
Yes.
Seen all kinds of things, so I did all the
Yeah.
research deep into NIH or ag things, and they have conflicting studies that aren't really studies, more like case studies on this. What, if anything, has your experience been on this, and how do you think about bananas?
Yeah. It's one of those things that always generates laughs, but I've got to say, I've seen it work. Now, what I've seen it, bees certainly love bananas, and some people use it as a kind of like a pollen patty, right? I wouldn't use it for that, so I wouldn't rely on it to offer my bees needed nutrition. So if I'm trying to fix a nutritional problem, I would absolutely go with a pollen patty. Where I've seen it do kind of crazy things is with chalk brood. And so there was a year where especially cool, wet springs, chalk brood can get bad. And I had a bee yard with 200 hives in it, and they all had chalk brood horribly. And I went and got big cases of bananas from Costco, and I took half of the bee yard, and I took 100 hives, and I put one whole banana cut in half in every single hive, in half, and came back. I don't know, 7 to 10 days later, and the half that had a banana, I couldn't hardly find any chalk brood anywhere in the whole hive. The half that the hives that didn't get bananas still had chalk brood like crazy. So I've seen it do some crazy good things with chalk brood in particular. So I'm a bit of a believer, even though it sounds hilarious. I've seen it work for chalk brood. That's the only thing I've seen it work for. But it did something.
Just got the peel on, no. In there.
You cut it
What
short.
was that?
With the peel,
Did you cut it in half lengthwise?
lengthwise.
I'm sorry, guys, I missed that.
You cut it in half lengthwise.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I would cut it in half long ways and then put both peel and all in the hive. Our crews loved it too because they were eating bananas for a week.
Thanks.
You
Very
bet.
good. Any other questions, comments? Oh, well, thank you so much, Blake. We really appreciate it.
Great to
Great
talk to you guys. My pleasure, guys. I'd love to visit sometime when I'm in Utah next.
All right, wonderful.
Thanks, Blake.
All right,
Awesome. Thank you,
again.
guys. See you
Bye-bye.
later. Bye.
Lady. La, la, la. Of course. All right, well, that was super cool. And thank you for that question about bananas.
Same thing. Because everybody says that's the smell they give off
Right.
when they're mad.
Yes, so I watched a lady on the internet, she walked around her yard with a banana on her head
Huh.
to prove that it does not evoke
Oh, really?
Oh, sounds nice.
That's a good idea.
reaction. I was just laughing. And then some people think they eat the bananas so
Yeah.
much that they attack it, and maybe why they're carrying out, sick bees maybe. It makes them like overactive, and then others are like, oh, that's potassium, and
Right.
they just love it. So I don't know.
Very cool. As part of helping everyone get ready for winter, next month, Peggy DeSanto is going to be speaking about her little company, which is a condensing hive. And it's where you insulate, but you insulate heavily the lid so that water will condense along the sides rather than dripping down onto your brood cluster or your cluster of bees. And so she'll tell us all about what her design is, and of course you can buy these. I think they're called hive huggers, or something like that. So that'll be really interesting. Just a little, of course, everybody. There's not many people here, but if anyone needs a mentor, Jen is the person to talk to. It's never too late to get a mentor. If you're feeling like you're not sure what's happening with your hive this late in the season, now is a great time to get a mentor. As always, it's actually compulsory. If you have bees, you have to have a license. And that's for two primary reasons. One, so the state can help you, and so you can help the state. Where the state helps you is it's free testing. you've got some type of funk in your hive and you want help at assessing what's going on, how to treat, what you need to do to eradicate the disease, they can help you with that, and it's all free. It's just $10 for like, I think 10 or 15 hives. So most of us, it would just be a $10 fee. And then the other component is when there is disease in your area, the state will let you know so that you can start looking out for it or preemptively test. Another thing I wanted to make you guys aware of was that you can register with your county mosquito abatement group and designate your property as a no spray zone. So typically, what you're going to find is there's going to be people walking around and they're going to be spraying the ground. But as you know, aerosols move with the wind. So if there's any kind of breeze or any kind of wind, you're going to be getting these mosquito pesticides flowing in your area, which could negatively impact your hive. This request has to be renewed every year, but every mosquito abatement group has the option, and all you have to do is, I was going to try to provide a list, but it was just too cumbersome. So here is the website, and then you just request or look for a link for the no spray zone request, and they do have it buried. So you may have to search around on the different websites. I went to the Salt Lake County one, and it was pretty clear. Utah County was not. I had to really search. So don't give up.
And is there South Salt Lake County too? Or
There
it
is
all-
a South Salt Lake County.
Yeah, you really need to kind of Google and find the correct mosquito abatement district for where you have your hives.
But this website should,
It gets you everywhere.
yeah, it lists everybody. Mm.
And they'll put fish in there.
Yes, yeah. So there's lots of options. So if you've got property where you have water rights, if you're doing flood irrigation, they'll come out and bring out little fish to help control the mosquito problem, and to no cost to you.
So do you know, they usually spray?
They've been spraying now, June, July, August.
We just got aware of this because, my mentee, my high schooler that was part of our youth beekeeping program, her mom texted me like, I don't know what time it was crazy, like 8 o'clock one night, it was almost dark, and she's like, Draper's spraying the golf course tonight for mosquitoes, and I live like in a low spot right behind the golf course, and I was like, oh no. And so we called the city's like, oh, it's the county. She gave me, we got the runaround, but I finally got a guy and his cell phone number, luckily, and he said, oh no, we did that last week. So I was like, great, but not that golf course. So they did the west side of I-15 from 114th to 148th in the Jordan Riverbed district. And so that had already been done, so it was kind of a little bit too late for us to warn beekeepers in the area. But he did tell me about the websites and about, they warn, and they cannot spray within 300 feet of your bees, wherever you say that they're located. And so, but I did just see, did you see she posted again today? They're actually gonna be fogging in somewhere in Salt Lake. And that's where the truck drives by and they fog the land. So that's a little bit more, I think, dangerous to the bees probably. But definitely go out and look. None of us really knew anything about the mosquito abatement program, and like it was kind of crazy to me that they don't let the public know very.
Here comes somebody posted with all I got was a map of Utah. I couldn't figure out how to.
Okay, well, let's go to this link, and we'll put this link up on Facebook too, and hopefully
Yeah.
this will straighten out.
They typically spray whether with people or with the trucks. This is what they say on their website, 10 o'clock at night, 10 and after. Of course, that doesn't help if you're running your air conditioner or you got your windows open.
Yeah, they do say that that's, when I was panicked the other night, that's what they said was like, get wet sheets. I read on a bunch of websites that said get wet sheets, throw them over your hive. And then just take them off in the morning.
Yeah, I think the wetness is to keep it cool because of course you're going to contain all the heat that the bees are generating.
Yeah.
And so it's more like the wetness of the towel or blanket is to provide evaporative cooling. And you would certainly want to remove it early in the morning. Yeah. Mm. All right. Excellent. And we've got everything updated. It's on YouTube. Thank you, Gree. We have winners for our t-shirt contest. Jeff and Jen Hine put this together. And so everybody who's volunteering at the state fair will get a free t-shirt, and then we will have any of the leftovers you can buy for $8.99. So thank you. I think Jen left already. All right, state fair. If you forget what day, what time, you can always use this link or use this QR code to get to the sign up sheet and check what you're doing. I have no idea what's going on at the fair. And so they are having a honey contest, and I'm not exactly sure where to take the honey. That's why it's empty. But we were going to try to, like, people could bring their honey to my house, and then I could take everybody's jars into wherever it is we're supposed to take them. Registration ends on the 2nd of September. You have to have the honey on site and pay the fee. I don't know if it's $2.50 or if it's $9. Either way, when you sign up, you initially see $2.50 for an entry fee, but then later on you have to purchase access to enter the fair. And I don't
have to purchase it. So I'm actually on it now. You have the option to purchase, I think, your fair ticket and an exhibitor pass, like if you wanted to actually have your own booth or something, I think is what it is.
Okay.
And so there is a $9, you can buy your ticket there so you can get in, but you
So
don't-
that's a savings of like $6 because the fair ticket for adults is 15. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is if you want to register for the contest, you have to create an account. And so this is what the website looks like. This is the address. And then when you click here to register,
this is where it gets a little hairy, so just pay attention.
then it says, please register first. And you're like, but yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to register. But what they're actually telling you is that you need to create a login account. So you would click on sign in, and then you would choose that you're going to be an exhibitor. Choose exhibitor. And then you've got a whole bunch of things that you can fill out, and your username, your password, and then you can register for the contest. And when you do that, you've got all these different options here. So the department that you want to choose, it's all departments, not agriculture. Because I spent like an hour figuring it out.
Like you have a lot of extra hours.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw a wrench in your thing right here. 'Cause
Don't. Now go ahead.
I was just sitting here trying to do it. And I had to go to horticulture as the division, not all departments miscellaneous.
So the way I got in,
And if you have questions, you can call the hotline.
was miscellaneous, and then honey, and they have honeycomb or honey extracted. They're not doing comb this year, so I'm not sure why comb is up there in terms of judging. And then in the description, I'm not sure exactly what you put in there, but
Okay, so
possibly, but I'm still waiting to hear back.
perfect. So if you go in the way I went in, if you go to, it asks you for your department. It's horticulture, and then it takes you to the division, and you scroll down and it's honey. And then the class, you scroll down and there's 4 choices. There's white, light amber, amber, and dark amber.
But there was nothing to click on. Is there something to click on?
Yeah.
See, when I did it on my desktop, there was nothing to click on. So maybe
was a
it's
drop
different.
down, just like this, so you could drop down and click on your.
There
So-
was none.
Oh, so, okay.
So
I would just
phone,
say-
horticulture, desktop.
I mean, it's different in two different places. That's frustrating, right? So if you guys need help and want to enter the honey contest, you can call me and I'll help you figure it out.
And
make
I
it
will
work
post
this
something on
way.
Facebook as soon as I hear back.
Yeah.
I'll be asking all these questions. That's okay. Par for the course,
But
right?
again, there is a description button there and I just left it blank because I was like, what am I supposed to say? Julie's honey? I don't get it. And I can tell you, they have to be dropped off on the Wednesday night by 6 o'clock before the first day of the fair. So the fair opens on Thursday, the 5th.
Right, so it's the
we
4th.
have to drop them off, or you can take them to the fair in the agriculture building and drop them off on the Wednesday night before 6 o'clock.
But I just don't know where to take them.
It's almost always the ag building where our booth is.
Okay,
So unless that's changed, I would start with the ag
And
building.
you can't pick them up to the day after the fair.
Right.
that's right. That's right.
And if you want to pick them up, technically they become the property of the fair.
That's correct.
And usually the judges or whoever, or the little guy that monitors the room, who I don't think is there anymore, he wants
No.
to take them home.
Yeah, he passed.
So if you want to pick them up, you have to fill out a form at the fair that says, I want to pick up my entry after the last day of the fair. Otherwise, they really are the property of the fair.
But
Last year Rosemary was able to take some of them home.
Well, I went over and took the booth down.
So
So she let me take the honey.
Well, people want to buy them.
yeah.
You're always there, the
Yeah.
people
It's not
are
the
trying
honey.
to buy that and just want to sell your honey. You should.
Yeah, so we can't sell anything from our booth, unfortunately. But this year, and I just actually sat here and purchased them, we're gonna have these little acrylic boxes to put the honey, judging honey in. So that people can't pick them up.
They'll be
drop them
locked.
off. Yeah, they'll be.
And they'll be nicely lit,
Yeah.
so it'll be a nice display.
That's a good plan.
Oh, and this year your honey is an 8-ounce clear jar with no markings, no labels on it, not instead of a pint. In the past, it's always been a pint, and everybody kind of complained about it. So this year it's an 8-ounce clear mason jar.
They would bring the honey to the booth and say, how much is this honey?
I know, yeah.
All right, yes, so we will make sure we get it posted. The basics of if you're a volunteer, we've got, I think, 54 people who are volunteering. By September 4th, I will send out an email and it will have information about where we are parking, how to get from parking to the building, and lots of other details. The day before your shift, I'll send you a text or I will call you if I don't get response from a text, to make sure you don't have any questions, to make sure you remember. The day of your shift, I'm saying 10 to 30 minutes prior to your shift beginning, depending on how fast of a walker you are, so that we don't leave the people who have been at the booth for 4 hours waiting. We're hoping to get the parking spot where we were last year, which was just right across the street from gate 6, which made it a 6-minute walk or less to get to the building. But this year, I'm not so sure. And again, I'll put all that information in the email. You've got, all the volunteers have t-shirts, and so we will have them labeled with your name, because you've told me what size you wanted to wear, and it will be bundled with for that particular day. So it should be easy to find. So you can find your t-shirt, put it on, and then you'll just organizing, replenishing supplies that are on the counter for our booth. Clean, sticky fingerprints if needed. There's always so many kids. So usually every shift is going to have to be doing some wiping. And then just have fun with it. Put on some antenna, be antenna, walk around, talk to people. There's no really wrong way to do it other than to leave the booth unattended.
No,
We needed flashlights to find the queen.
Right.
We did talk about
We did, and we decided people could use their phones because we don't want to freak the bees out by constantly having lights. Yeah. And we're hoping, although I haven't been able to talk to the person who has the bees, but we're hoping that the queen will be marked with like a bright green or a bright yellow. Right, because that was the color for the year, but we're hoping that he'll mark her so it's easier to see.
He's okay with UV light. Like that or UV flashlight.
Just don't put it in their eyes. That I'm not sure. That might be more damaging actually, because they see in the ultraviolet range. So during your shift, and I will put directions on where the bathroom is, and I can't remember the name of the building. It's like a 4-minute walk. It's not far away.
Exhibit arena behind.
Right. And I'll be adding that. Yes, there should be 2 places to find the bathrooms. We're supposed to have a cold water cooler so that you can get water. There should be a refrigerator that you could use to put in snacks or drinks. You want to make sure that you're every so often one of the 2 people are looking at the photo booth to make sure teenagers aren't running off with our bee glasses and antenna and bee suits. And we have honey sticks. So every shift will have, unfortunately, only about 81, 82 honey sticks because we're there for 11 days. It's a lot of honey sticks. But anyways, you can give them out to children who, if you ask them a question, something that they may have just learned, or maybe it's on the displays around our booth, if they can answer the question, you can give them a honey stick.
And we've said too, like, they're not for adults, it's only for the kids. Can't be for a child under 2, right? So if they come in a family, you can't, and they have a baby, don't give them an extra honey stick for that. And we won't give them away during the morning shifts when the school kids are there, because there's just too many school kids and we don't have enough honey sticks. Just kind of be judicious, it's not like walking out, any kid that walks up to our booth, you're handing a honey stick. If a kid comes to our booth and is kind of genuinely interested in the bees and has questions and things like that, then that's when, like, I would always say, hey, you seem like you really like the bees. Do you want to answer a question? I've got a prize for you. And then, they would answer, I'd say, what's a boy bee called, or whatever. You can make up whatever question you want. And then they'll answer it, or they're hum and haw or whatever, and then I will give them a honey stick. So it's not just like we're handing willy-nilly out honey sticks to anybody at the booth.
And if you can, when your shift is over, wait a couple minutes for the next crew to show up. If nobody shows up, call me. Oh. Yes, so hopefully.
So let's go back and talk about, so if you're working a weekend shift in the evening or the late afternoon, you need to probably allow an hour to get to the fair, whatever it is, from like the time from your house to the fair, and then like maybe 30 to 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, because there's concerts at the fair Friday and Saturday and maybe even Sunday night, and there's rodeos. And so when you're working, look at your shift and then go out to the website and look at the fair activities. If there's something major going on, like a concert or a rodeo, parking is unbelievably difficult, even with your parking pass. I would highly recommend parking at a track stop, leaving your car there, and then riding tracks to the stop at gate 6. Because you literally get off the tracks and walk across the street and can get in. Last year before, I literally drove around for an hour. I was like an hour and a half late to my shift because I could not find parking anywhere. So just know if you're on one of those evening and, on a shift where there is rodeo, concert, think about taking tracks or having somebody drop you off.
So the tracks will be the green line. I've got a map here. If anybody needs it to see how they can get from there.
So it's green line, and what stop is it? What's it called? Fair Park. Okay.
And I have a document with how to use public transportation. So, yeah, excellent.
Parking lot last year for like my Friday night shift was full, but they still had some spots.
Yes.
Oh, I volunteer.
Yeah.
Okay, you
You can park 3 blocks back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right, so hopefully, when I send out the initial email, that will answer like 80-90% of your questions. And then on there will be all of our contact information, and you can contact me, Walt or Julie or Rosemary from the 3rd to the 9th. All right, so we have our first presentation this year by our youth beekeeper, Andrew Holmes. And since my microphone and volume is up, we should be good to go.
One thing I learned about the bees is what happens when you get stung. When you get stung, you were supposed to pull the stinger out right away, to leave the stinger in, the stinger gets worse. Then you get away from the bees. If you stay by the bees after you've been stung, more will sting you. There's an alarm pheromone that alerts other bees when someone or something is stung. I think this ability is scary and cool. Not afraid of being around the bees. Walt says he's impressed by that, and I'm doing a good job. You love how they're trying, and I like watching the bees work. I'll get picked for this, but I'm glad I did. I've always thought bees were fascinating. And being the youth beekeeper has helped me learn more about bees. I like dumping the bees into the hive.
Oh, well done. So this is our first year having a youth beekeeper program. And we chose from the applicants, someone who was in junior high and someone who was in high school. So Andrew is our junior high student. Walt, do you want to say anything else?
Doing a great job. He's got a great location for him. Behind his house is where the nursery grows their plants.
Oh, wow.
And then he's got a stream just a few houses down, so it's like a perfect location. Got 2 honey supers on there. So
And he
This is-
knows how to keep a smoker lid. He could give
the
lessons.
trick to the smoker is the propane torch.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite.
Just get it on the side of the smoker and pump it. Don't worry about opening up the smoker, trying to light it. Just burn the side of your smoker and.
Oh, very
works
interesting.
Every time,
All right.
yeah, whether you use a wood or burlap or whatever.
And Andrew, I'm gonna tell you, your hive has done so much better than our other high school mentee, who has had nothing but laying workers and replacing queens all summer long. So I don't know if it's the mentor, probably. You got the better mentor, or just we got bad luck with her bees all summer long. So anyway, congratulations, you've done a good job.
Yeah, well done. Whoops. We have set a date for our fall banquet. It's going to be Saturday, November 9th from 6 to 9. And more details will be coming, but it's always a lot of fun. It's a potluck, silent auction, honey contest.
The silent auction, if you get, well, this is a example, Winter Dairy, milk people. They've donated this, and this is just exercise equipment. And a massager and things like that. It's about, it's what, $150 worth of stuff that they donated. So if you know anybody that's got a company, small company, a local company like this is great. I've sent letters to like Smiths and Harmons and all those people. And some of the bee supply stores. But anybody you can get to donate something, that'll help us out. This is where a lot of our budget comes from.
Yeah, or if you've got something and you want to re-gift it.
Yeah, yeah.
Silent auction's a good place to do that. All right, so on to something very serious. Elections are also happening at the banquet, and we are going to need just about every position filled. So these are all of the positions. There's anywhere between 17 and 19 key roles that keeps the club moving forward. And we have about 9 people who are performing all of these positions. So in brief, what my hope is that there'll be more board members. So we'll get everybody to show up next month so that if you're interested, you can talk to them about what do they do? Really, how much time is it? How hard is it? None of it's scary. If you don't know enough about beekeeping, you want to learn more, get on the board. That is the fastest way to learn. And that's what I did. I started out as the new beekeeper in 2019. And I've now done just about every role on the board. And I've learned a lot. I have not mastered Zoom, but I've learned a lot about everything else. All right, so the president doesn't have to come up with the vision or the direction of the club. That's for everybody on the board to decide. But you are the person who puts together slides or puts together the agenda and send it off to other people to share it either on Facebook or our website or the emails. And it does require that you are here for all the meetings. You arrive a bit early to help set up the classroom. President answers the club emails and forwards those particular emails to other members, co-chair the fall banquet, but everybody on the board does that because it's a big event. So depending upon, well, hopefully we have that all figured out now. So it's about 3 to 5 hours a month, plus being here. And then it's like an hour and a half, 2-hour board meeting once a month. And then our vice president is Walt. And vice president is also involved in helping to create content. Sorry? That is in the bylaws, but Walt, yeah. So president is up, vice president is up. So vice president helps with creating content with the program directors and the president, if possible, to help set up. Walt also chaired the youth beekeeper program, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the vice president. It could be another volunteer, co-chair the state fair committee, as well as the banquet. So how much do you think you spend a month? About 2 hours average? All right. Then there's secretary. And secretary is another position that is becoming open. So you take all the notes during the board meeting, you edit them, you send them out for people to look at, to correct your grammar, to fill in omissions. And then those board minutes actually become like the official notes for the society that we keep. Secretary sends out monthly notifications about the meetings. Usually we have a membership sign-up sheet, and the secretary would then add any new people who've become interested to our mailing list. They also co-chair the fall banquet. So it's about 3 hours a month or less. I wouldn't say it's much more. And then our treasurer, Michael Hughes. Michael has said he would stay on if no one else is interested, but it's still up for vote during the banquet. So they take care of the taxes, they write the checks to reimburse when board members buy things for the club. We give an honorarium to our guest speakers. And then they keep track of who has paid, and we've been having problems like people will pay, but they don't fill out the membership form. So he contacts everybody to get that kind of information. So it's about 2 hours a month. Yeah. Yeah, it's wonderful. Then we have the program chairs. And typically what the program chair or chairs have done is they would actually be more in charge of setting the content for the meeting, guest speakers, workshops, additional community events. I think we're tapped out on community events. We do 3 major events a year, which is Ladybug Festival, Bug Fest at the Natural History Museum, and then the State Fair. We also send out the thank you notes to our guest speakers, and then they would also be involved in helping to set up the fall banquet. Swarm coordinator, Julie's our swarm coordinator, and we're hoping that she stays on because it's a significant task during swarm season, April through, the end of July, beginning of August, because you have to manage how many.
Lots of controls line, unfortunately.
So Julie, what was it? At 1 month, it was like 2,000 texts or something.
Yeah, I'm trying to manage most of it by text. I mean, I answer the phone call when they call, and then I ask them to text me pictures, their address and everything. And then I use that to forward a text to the closest beekeeper that's on the swarm list. It's a whole lot easier, I would say, to manage it by text than it is phone call, because it takes a long time to call people and explain where it is, and then they still want to see a text with pictures, and it becomes very cumbersome. So I've just kind of gone to all texting unless I can't get a hold of somebody, and then got a couple of guys who don't really text and I call them. So anyway, yeah, it can be, in a good swarm year, it can be very time consuming. This time of year, and I can show you how to do it, I would put it up, in your, if you have an Apple phone, and I'm assuming in a Google phone, you can do the same thing, but, a automatic response, and so when somebody calls and I can tell on my phone when it's coming in from the hotline, I just hit the automated message that says, I'm on the other line, if you have a honeybee problem, please send me photographs, text me photographs, and an explanation of what your problem is, and I'll give you a call back. 99% of the time, it's yellow jackets this time of year, and that's why I got tired of answering it. I'm like, I'm working full-time in a fairly new job, and it's just been overwhelming, so.
Do people not know the difference between honeybees
No.
and yellow jackets?
No, absolutely not, and they will argue with me till they are blue in the face that they know these are honeybees.
Coming out of the
Like,
ground.
yeah, coming out of the ground, and I'm like, they live in the ground, so it's, I mean, it's actually, I really enjoy it, it's just with my new job this year, I've just been so overwhelmed with it, but it's probably, it's more than 6 hours a month, it's probably a couple hours a day during swarm season, I would say. I mean, we really need a retired person, I'm not gonna lie, that doesn't mind being on the phone and doesn't, mind doing all of it.
But
Yeah.
maybe two people
Yeah,
could do
maybe
it?
2 people could manage it together, or, yeah. Or you might find some new way of doing it that's way better than the way I do it, so I'm happy to
You
pass
put
it
out
along.
pictures by your phone. The phone number to call, maybe you could have honeybee, yellow jacket.
It is on our website, so there are actually people that are like, I looked at your website, I'm still really unclear, and I'm like, yeah. So there, I mean, we've done a lot of things, but it might not hurt for me to text them back a picture, right? I mean, it looks like this, it's not a honeybee, call a pest. But part of the problem this year too, is that somehow the pest control companies have tuned into our hotline. And so when somebody calls in and says, I have bees, rather than them screening for what it looks like via text or whatever in photographs, they just say, call Wasatch Beekeepers. So I called them back and I'm like, no, do not do that to me. So it's just been, yeah, it's been a bit of, but last year, like I didn't have hardly anything. I think we had 9 swarms all year.
I had tree trimmers call me.
Oh, yeah, tree trimmers will call us and the hotline as well, because if somebody's cutting down a dead tree that has a colony in it, they won't touch it until the colony's out, so we have to have them cut the section where the bees are, lower it to the ground, and then we'll get a beekeeper to come out and take that, and then they'll finish cutting the tree down. But we get all kind, I mean, it's an interesting job because you do see all kinds of hives and all kinds of bees in all kinds of locations, it's kind of crazy.
All right, great. Mentoring coordinator, this is an important position. It doesn't take a lot of time. We have it all set up. The background stuff where we can put in the address for the mentors and the mentees, look at it on Google Map and match people up. And it's essentially, you're just matching people who need support with someone who's offered to help. But Jen said she would stay on unless someone else would like to try their hand at this. Dean is our IT guru who runs our meetings. So he arrives about an hour before the meeting, and then we tear our hair out. But this is not a position where you would have to attend board meetings. We have 4 people who are helping us with all the social media. We have Katara, who redid our website this year and maintains it. Tyson, who helps to filter out all the spam and scams happening on that platform. Jen is trying to get things going on Instagram because we'd like to get the interest of younger people, and apparently Facebook is just for us old folks.
Just saying.
Yeah. And then Gree has been helping us getting all of our presentations up onto our YouTube channel. And again, these are relatively low cost in terms of time investment, and it's not necessary for you to come to board meetings, but our board meetings are open to public. So anybody would like to, open to the whole membership. So anybody who would like to attend is welcome to do so. And then we have our educational hives. And I've been managing the educational hives. It'd be better if there were 2 people doing that. And it's, just all the basic beekeeping tasks. It gets a little overwhelming in the summer with 7 hives, but we're going to be paring it down to 2 hives again with the expectation for winter, with the expectation that we're going to be splitting in the spring again. And then hopefully we will continue our youth beekeeping program, and that way we'll have all the resources to then supply a package for our new youth beekeepers. And then the Utah State Fair Committee, it's myself, Walt, Julie, and Rosemary. And going forward, I think it should be a lot easier. The big thing would be the t-shirt contest if the new board decides to do that, or there are 2 designs that can be used. It's nice having all the volunteers in the same t-shirt so that the fair visitors can easily tell who's a fair visitor and who actually is affiliated with our booth. And again, it's really just the month of September, and then preparations in July and August. So all of these positions are up and available. And of course, it's just you sitting here, and I think 5 people, maybe 2 other people online. We have to have people step up. It's not as overwhelming as maybe it seems, but I will still be on the board. I'm going to be helping Ashley with developing programs, getting speakers, but every other position is open. And so unless we have people volunteer their time, the club doesn't go forward. So I think Blake talked about most things of what's happening here, right? Here, most likely our queen has already started to lay eggs for her. That will be our winter bees, our fat bees. So it's natural if you start seeing your population decline and you're wondering if something is wrong, it's a natural decline. You're going to start to see fewer eggs, fewer larvae, and over time there'll be fewer capped brood. And then all of the hives that I have, there are no drones. All of the 7 hives here on campus, there are only 2 that still have drones. So they seem to be getting rid of them early this year. What about you guys? What are you seeing in your hives? You're seeing lots of drones still. Very interesting. Okay.
Because that's what's on these frames.
Very interesting. Okay. So I guess lots of microclimates.
Sunflowers keep coming, drones keep coming.
Okay.
I don't have sunflowers yet.
But here in Salt Lake, I'm seeing definitely a decrease in pollen and nectar in my hives. I've started feeding some of my weaker hives. I'm going to be looking at everybody again, especially the ones here, treating them with Apivar for the, changing the regime, mite treatment regime. I've been using for the club hives, oxalic acid, and removing capped drone cells. In every one of my hives that I've had here, I had a frame and they just built it out with wax with the larger comb size for drones. And once it was full, I just got rid of it. So I've been trying to implement more of an integrated pest management. If you haven't been treating, your mite population is likely high. And if you haven't been treating, your bees are probably going to be quite aggressive because they're going to be bothered by the infestation. So like Blake was saying, pay attention to how your bees are acting. Sit there and watch them before you open the hive, and then keep track of, do they become aggressive as soon as you open the lid? Do they become more aggressive 15, 20 minutes later? It can all give you an indication of what their problem is. If they're hot and they're coming after you as soon as you open the lid, something's wrong on the inside. Maybe it's mites, maybe it's the queen, maybe they don't have enough nutrition. If it happens as you're observing them or doing the inspection, it could mean you're being too quick with your inspection. You're being too rough. You need to slow down because you're killing bees and it's making them more upset. Or it could just be an indication that we're in a nectar dearth and they're going to be more protective as you start opening up the hive and moving the frames around. I wouldn't suggest that you add any new supers now, even if you were hoping to get more honey. That honey needs to be left for the bees. And so if you don't add any more new supers, this will force the bees to start backfilling and start filling out those hives, those frames for winter. Most of us around the state are going to see a small nectar flow, and that should be coming on now, if not soon. All my asters are just about ready to bloom. I expect by next week or the week after, the next 2 weeks, we're going to see a lot more winter or fall flowers come online to provide pollen and nectar. All of the asters, and asters come in a lot of varieties. They can be real tall, they can be close to the ground, they can be kind of weedy, but they're a great source of pollen and nectar. Goldenrod I don't know, has anyone seen goldenrod blooming yet? I don't think I've seen any, but that's a good source if you're not in the extreme of the urban setting. Rocky Mountain bee plant. I love this plant. It grows about 4.5 feet tall, requires very little water once it's established, once it germinates. And the flowers, as the stalk grows taller, it just keeps producing more and more flower buds. I see hummingbirds. I've seen 7 different species of native bees on here. The honeybees love it.
You grow it in your yard, if you pick those.
Yes. Yeah. So I have it. You can find it up above, you can find it up in the foothills, and you could take some seeds from there. Like there's a whole bunch behind the Natural History Museum. I've never seen the starts in a nursery. And you can buy them online. I'm going to be harvesting. I have a bunch of these growing in my park strip. And so I was going to harvest a bunch of the seeds and bring them in. Yeah, so later on when all the seeds are ready, I was thinking we should bring in the seeds and we can share them with everyone. Because once they're not perennial, but they reseed very, very readily. So you can just throw the seeds out wherever you want them to grow now. Yep. Yep. Yeah, but these are a great plant. So what you need to be doing, fresh water. That's the mantra. Fresh water, mite treatment. You want to, if you're going to pull off frames or you have frames of honey and you're not sure how to extract it, make sure that you freeze your frames. Otherwise, it's going to get disgusting. And this happens really easily. So the wax moth, she looks something like this. She kind of looks like a clothing moth. And they make the larvae make all this webbing, and they prefer the brood nest. So they will tunnel underneath and get to all the protein that's left behind from larvae being developed in those cells, from the pollen that's there. And then they poop everywhere, and wherever they go, they create this web. And so what I have circled here is what the little poops look like. It's called frass. And they look like little rectangular black things. And once they get into your hive, so if you see them and you got lots of bees, it means that your hive is not strong enough to kick them out of the hive. If you have frames that you were storing and you put them in a nice bin or something with a septum around the edge to keep the moths out, the eggs are already on those frames, because wherever there's a beehive, they're going to be wax moths. So if you freeze them for 2 days, then you're going to kill the eggs, you'll kill the larvae, and all you have to worry about then is storing your frames so that that doesn't become reinfected. But fear not, once they do come in infected, you can, when it gets to be this stage where they're tunneling underneath or they've got a lot of webbing, then you're just going to have to scrape the frame and you're going to have to get rid of all of that wax.
Sunlight.
No, they don't like sunlight and they don't like fresh air. So if you have enough space, you can look online. They're all, there's ways in which you just make a frame holder, have something on top to keep the rain and snow off, but that it can get sun from the side and lots of air, and you can store your frames just out in the open as well. You don't have to keep them in a box. But
Store mine in totes out in the sun until it gets cold enough, and move it in the shed.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. But it happens to all of us. And you don't want to let it go and go, oh, that's too disgusting to deal with. I'll deal with that later. Because the larvae will eat the wood off the frames. So they'll ruin the hive body. They'll ruin the frames. So as soon as you see that the issue, you got to address it. Okay. Trickle feeding. It's also what Blake was talking about. So you're feeding them a little bit amount, but you're feeding consistently. And that way they don't start ramping up production, but they keep production going, and you hopefully you maintain the nutrition for all those winter bees that are being that are developing now and in the next couple of weeks. There was a whole bunch of information given in July's presentation, so you can go find that if you want to review it on YouTube. And then treat for mites. So there aren't a lot of options with this heat. Apivars are your best option. And you can buy it in bulk. I bought a whole bunch to be able to treat the hives here, treat some of my hives. You can get it at a variety of places. You can get it directly from the company.
And you put that in before you harvest them?
No. No. So, and that's also in July's presentation. The honey must be off because this is a pesticide. It's not an organic acid. So you wouldn't want this with any of the honey that you plan to consume yourself or trying to sell. So going into winter, keep your mite population low, help your bees increase honey and pollen in the hive by not putting on supers. If necessary, feed pollen patties, feed the syrup, if that's what's needed where your hives are located. Next, in September and October, we'll talk more about what a candy board is. It's essentially white sugar, granulated sugar with complete and honeybee healthy and some other things that are mixed together, and you create it's not a dough, it's not a liquid, it's just sort of like a face scrub. And then it hardens up a little bit. You have to provide openings so that the bees can actually come up through the queen excluder there. And the moisture from the hive should help soften the candy board during the winter. And if they run out of honey, which they typically don't, but when bees cluster in the winter, they may cluster in a position where they don't have any honey in the frames next to them. And instead of them going 2 frames over to get honey, they'll freeze because it's too far away from the cluster. So they go up because heat rises. And so the reason why you want a candy board or something like it on top is they're always going to, they're going to go up. You never know how far to the side they're going to go. So this is an insurance, a safeguard that there'll be enough food. All the years I've been keeping bees, last year was the first year they actually really ate the candy board. I don't know what it was about last year, maybe because it wasn't quite cold enough, so they were more active and they needed more energy. Typically, in years past, I put on the candy board and 90% is still there, and I just save it for the next year. So it's not like you lose anything if the bees don't use it that winter.
Looking at that picture, looks a lot like, as thick as that is, it would add insulation to the top of the hive.
Certainly does. Yep. And then there's another option we'll talk more about, a quilt board, which is essentially like the same thing as as the candy board in terms of dimensions and depth, but instead of the sugar in there, you have a piece of burlap fabric underneath wood shavings. And that helps to collect the condensation. But Peggy DeSanto, when she gives her presentation, I would imagine you're not going to need a quilt board to keep condensation from raining down onto your cluster, because the way she's talking about insulating the hive, it directs the condensation to come down the sides, because the sides will be cooler than the lid of the hive. But we'll talk more about that. All right, any comments, questions? Time for bed? All right, well, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for coming.